The death of a loved one impacts us in unimaginable ways. One day they're there, and the next you're saying goodbye, and it never seems like enough time. For 16-year-old Monica Carrasco, that person was her father. The grief after his passing majorly affected the teen's life, but her family never imagined another tragedy was on the horizon. Today, on Dark Matters, the disappearance of Monica Carrasco. Monica Cassandra Carrasco was born on December 13, 1986, to Kathy and Ramon. With a dimpled smile that earned her the nickname Happy Happy, Monica was an upbeat, positive force to those who knew her. Far from shy, Monica often volunteered to read scripture out loud in church, or was the first to lend a helping hand. Her compassion extended beyond people, though. A vegetarian since childhood by her own choice, she loved animals and considered becoming a veterinarian at one point. As she grew, her academic passions changed but never weakened. She loved reading, spending time in libraries and bookstores, and had her sights set on Harvard, either to be a lawyer or work for NASA. Despite her strong Christian devotion and academic pursuits, Monica still made time to play basketball at school, bake homemade bread, listen to music, play the saxophone, paint, and jog. The Carrascos lived in Balmore, Texas, where members of their family held prominent positions in the community. Monica's uncle, Rosendo Carrasco, was the Reeves County Justice of the Peace. He and his wife, Arcelia, owned a well-known local landmark called Carrasco's Mercantile. Monica also had her Aunt Velma and Uncle Abel Baeza, who lived on the outskirts of town. Abel Baeza was at one point the city manager of Balmore, but it's unknown at what time he held that position. And though Monica was surrounded by family, after tragedy befell the Carrascos, her grief manifested in dark ways. While fighting bone cancer, Monica's father, Ramon, passed away from a heart attack on November 8, 2000. Over the next 3 years, Monica's depression steadily grew, and Kathy had a hard time getting her daughter to eat. After losing more than 50 pounds in 2003, Monica was hospitalized in Odessa for anorexia and depression. Certain family members claim Monica suffered from schizophrenia, but I can't find any indication she was given medication for this, which doesn't mean she wasn't. It may have just not been publicly reported. Monica was released from the hospital with a strict diet and antidepressants. According to Kathy, Monica went to live with her aunt and uncle and twin cousins, the Baezas, because she was working full-time and couldn't make sure Monica followed her treatment plan. Other reports claim Monica chose to live with the Baezas as she was angry with her mother over the hospitalization. Aunt Velma made sure her niece was well-nourished and taking her medication, and Monica managed to gain 1.5 pounds in a few weeks. It was Monica's junior year at Alpine High School, and the 16-year-old seemed to be on the path to conquer her demons through treatment and by keeping her faith close. She often read her Bible before taking off for a jog down the street, but one morning, under the dark of night, Monica vanished. Thursday, October 7th, 2003, the Baezas, 4 miles outside of Balmore. Kathy and Monica spoke that day, exchanging I love yous and praying together, the void between mother and daughter slowly repairing. Velma claims that night Monica played Nintendo with her twin cousins and seemed in good spirits. Her cousins saw Monica go to bed around 11 p.m., and when they checked on her a couple of hours later, they found her asleep. There are time differences between reports, but a majority of sources say that sometime between 1 and 6 a.m. that morning, Monica vanished, wearing only her pajamas and no shoes. The only other thing missing was her Bible. She'd left behind her medication, and there was no sign of a struggle or foul play. At 9:30 a.m., when Kathy called to check on her daughter, Velma told her Monica was missing. Immediately, the mother left her job in Marfa, Texas, and rushed home to help search. Reeves County Sheriff's Office, U.S. Border Patrol, Balmorhea Volunteer Fire Department, Texas Rangers, Reeves County Detention Center employees, Balmorhea State Park employees, the Texas Department of Public Safety, family, and locals helped search for Monica. Agencies utilized horseback, airplanes, and low-flying helicopters grazing the treetops in certain areas to try and find the missing teen. Searchers waded through canals, searched in Lake Balmorhea, the local park, under bridges and culverts, all across Balmorhea and neighboring communities, by foot and by car. The search started from the Baeza residence, expanding to a 10-mile radius, but there was no trace of Monica and no new evidence uncovered. The rugged, rocky, thorny, cactus-ridden terrain surrounding the Baeza's home would have made it difficult and painful to trek on bare feet, and Monica was without shoes. The case information was entered into both the Texas Law Enforcement Telecommunication System, as well as the National System, and the Texas DPS Missing Persons Division. Local media covered the case, and hundreds of tips flooded local law enforcement, but each one led to a dead end. Since there was no sign of a struggle, it seemed Monica either left the Baeza residence of her own will or was lured out. The Reeves County Sheriff's Office investigated leads, but none amounted to any new information. Family worried that the anniversary of her father's death might have motivated her to take off, or that she might have been taken or caught a ride with someone, and that she was in danger. But despite her depression, Kathy didn't believe Monica would have just run away. Devastated, all family could do was wait and hope for answers to surface. Searches continued through October, leading law enforcement into South Reeves and North Jeff Davis County. In April of 2004, the Laura Recovery Foundation of Houston, an organization specializing in finding missing children, led an area-wide search with the help of local volunteers, law enforcement, and cadaver dogs. Monica's aunt Velma said the family hoped for a large turnout, but that they were, quote, too emotional. A Project Jason forum user claimed that on June 30th, 2004, a couple of truckers allegedly saw someone who resembled Monica at a rest area near Indianapolis, Indiana, along Highway 70. They said she left with an older male driving an 18-wheeler. I couldn't find a legitimate source to corroborate this information, so its validity is unknown. If this was an actual tip, it seems nothing has publicly come of it. In August 2004, Monica's case was the focus of the 18-Wheel Angel campaign, a program where truck drivers or travelers place posters of a particular missing person along their routes. Law enforcement conducted more searches with the aid of a psychic out of Little Rock, Arkansas, who presented possible scenarios and locations where Monica might be found. But after searching a historical church where Monica occasionally visited with her uncle Abel, a possible gravesite 7 miles north of Balmorhea, another area 3 miles east of town, and one more location, law enforcement was no closer to finding Monica than when they began, though it wasn't for a lack of effort. The Reeves County Sheriff released a timetable of searches for Monica to assure the public that they were still investigating her case, as several people were concerned authorities weren't doing enough. Despite the $10,000 reward, no one came forward with information, but people do have their theories. Because there is so little evidence, the theories vary greatly. Some believe that a family member was involved, though there's no known evidence to back this claim. Monica's uncle fails a lie detector test in relation to the case. The Charlie Project page seems to imply it was her uncle Abel Baeza, but I couldn't find a publication to clarify that. By now, we know polygraph examination is not an exact science. Many factors can interfere with the results, and they're not admissible in most courts. Abel Baeza was arrested in April of 2013 on unrelated theft of property and missing funds charges for several checks he wrote while employed by the city. Because both her uncle Abel and uncle Rosendo held government positions in Balmore, I can see why people might be suspicious of a cover-up of sorts, but again, there is nothing to indicate the family had anything to do with Monica's disappearance, so we have our next theory. 5 months before she disappeared in May of 2003, Monica was harassed by a bus driver. She never reported the incident to official authorities, but she did refuse to ride the bus to school afterwards. Law enforcement followed up on this lead, interviewed the driver in question, who has been ruled out as a suspect. Rosendo Carrasco theorized his niece might have been picked up by someone driving along Highway 17, only 4 blocks from the Baeza residence. Because Balmore was such a small community, Rosendo believed if Monica was with a friend or ran off with a local boy, that information would have already been uncovered. No one local went missing at the same time as Monica. There has been speculation she possibly met up with someone she'd contacted online. However, there's no public evidence to support this theory either. Though authorities don't have a concrete theory, they say Rosendo's idea is possible. Others believe Monica's sudden disappearance was related to her recent struggles with depression, anorexia, and the death of her father. It's been speculated Monica's antidepressants possibly caused her to become disoriented and confused, which might explain why she possibly left of her own accord. It's unknown exactly what brand or type of antidepressant she was prescribed, but side effects can range from sleep problems, suicidal thoughts, weight gain, headaches, bizarre dreams, and blurred vision. According to family, Monica also suffered from schizophrenia. This came from only one publication, and there was no mention if she was being treated for it, so I'm unsure of the validity of this claim. However, those who suffer from schizophrenia can experience delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, sleep problems, an increase in unusual thoughts that can lead to paranoia, just to name a few possible symptoms. Because we don't know for sure if Monica was treated for or even had schizophrenia, it's unknown if it factored into her disappearance. Others have speculated everything from human trafficking to hitchhiking and sleepwalking, but as of right now, there are no answers for the town of Balmore and the Carrasco family. In August of 2008, Monica's case was featured on the Q Center for Missing Persons 17-state tour called On the Road to Remember. The tour traveled all over the country to bring awareness to missing persons cases, and locals turned up for the tour rally held by the Carrascos. In 2011, Kathy Carrasco painted several portraits of missing children, including Monica, which were included in the City of Austin's Mexican American Cultural Center Arts Showcase. In 2013, the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas Rangers posted their cold cases online in hopes of garnering more attention for them. Then, in April 2015, hope resurfaced. Monica's case was officially reopened, with the current Reeves County Sheriff expressing the need to find closure for the family and the community, who still wants answers. Kathy Carrasco has never stopped looking for Monica, though, and says that the ordeal has felt like she's in a, quote, living nightmare. Monica Carrasco was 16 years old at the time she disappeared. She was approximately 100 to 111 pounds, had dark, shoulder-length brown hair with red streaks, dark brown eyes, and pierced ears. She also had a small, light-colored mole on her left cheek and a chickenpox scar near her hairline on her forehead and dimples in both cheeks. She was last seen wearing a long beige or white nightgown and had no shoes or socks. She was possibly carrying a large white or black Bible. If she were alive today, she would be 31 years old. Anyone with information on Monica's disappearance should contact the Reeves County Sheriff's Office at 432-445-4901. Special thanks to the Patreon family. The names you see on screen are just some of the people who financially contribute to this channel. Whether they are passionate about cases like Monica's or the other dark content on this channel, their support cannot be overstated. If you are interested in supporting the channel, information is in the description, but even if you only continue to support by watching, thank you. Thank you for giving Monica's case a moment of your time, and my heart goes out to her family and friends. They've gone too long without answers, and we all hope closure can begin soon. And no matter what you choose to believe or what you speculate, I ask you only for respect in the comments below, both for Monica and her family. And remember, though these may be dark matters, the darkness always matters. Thank you for watching the video. Exposure to cases such as Monica's is highly important. And thank you all for your continued support and for always receiving these cases openly and respectfully. Stay safe, friends, and have a good night.